My dad was manufacturing meth for the Hells Angels. I remember going with my mom on like crack runs in Palo Alto and 30 crack dealers surrounding the car. I just literally pulled over one day and said, all the oxen free. Like, I give up. I don't have this figured out.
Hello and welcome back to the Almost False podcast, where I interview regular people with incredible stories. Today, our guest is Matt from Denver, Colorado. He has an incredible story with a broken childhood and how he overcame that over the years. I can't wait to talk to him. And so I don't want to waste more of your time. Let's get into the story with Matt. That's amazing. So you talked about your dad. Walk me through your childhood. What did it look like where you grew up? How was your relationship with your parents and how that all went down?
So when I was a child, my parents were probably 25 when they got pregnant with me, and they were wild, man. So this was the Bay Area of California, Palo Alto area in the 80s before California became what it is now. It was pretty wild, gangs and lots of drugs. And anyway, my dad was manufacturing meth for the Hells Angels. He cooked meth, and I believe him and my mom were also using it. So, you know, they could have potentially, my mom may have been using drugs while pregnant with her children. I'm not 100% certain on that. She's passed now. But, you know, my mom was getting really tired of the lifestyle. My dad wasn't a faithful man. You know, he was in this drug life and lots of different women living that drug dealer lifestyle. My mom was being physically abused and stuff like that. I'm sure there's two sides to every story. My mom obviously struggled with drugs too, but that being said, she decided to cooperate with the federal, with the feds, and I still don't know all the details of it, but she ended up cooperating with the feds, and my dad ended up going to federal prison. My mom got addicted to crack cocaine and got into that lifestyle. And so when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I remember waking up in the middle of the night. My mom wouldn't be home, and we'd wait around all night, me and my sister, and sometimes she'd be gone all day. We'd have to go to neighbors' houses and stuff and ask for food and help and stuff like that. My grandparents and some aunts and uncles were fighting to take us away from our mom. I went and stayed with an aunt in Vacaville, California. I was 6 at the time. And my mom showed up out of the blue. And I was told not, my mom was to show up, to not get in the car with her, but I did. I got in the car with my mom. She showed up while I was walking home from school, and I got in the car with her, and then we went and found my sister. And my sister told my mom no, she couldn't get in the car with her, but she saw my knees shaking, how scared I was. My sister got in the car with us, and my mom kind of took us up to Washington State. I'm not sure how the custody and all that was going at the time. I don't think anyone had custody of us yet, so my mom was taking advantage of the situation, and we headed up north to Washington State. And I remember as we drove through Oregon, we stayed in this hotel, and my mom got really sick. She was coming off the drugs, and we stayed with this lady in this hotel, and she just took care of me and my sister while my mom was coming off the crack. And we made it up to Port Angeles, and the plan was we were staying with missionaries, that my dad had missionaries speaking to him in prison. They got me and my mom into church. We moved up to Washington, and my mom found God and got off the drugs and found Jesus. This was 1990. Well, it turns out my mom was pregnant when we made that drive up to Washington, and she gave birth shortly after moving to Washington. And she had my little brother, Gabe, who actually just passed away. And he was a crack baby, and he was half black, half white. With the crowd she was running around with in California, she was hanging out with a lot of drug users and stuff. And her and my dad were thinking about getting back together, but once my mom gave birth to this black baby, that was a no-go for my dad. And my mom ended up remarrying up there in Washington State when I was 8 years old. She met a guy about a year after being there in the church, met these missionaries, and he took on my brother Gabe, And then my mom was sober for 7 years. And then we had a decent little run there from about 7 till I was about 12 or 13. It was like a drug-free home. My stepdad, pretty good guy. And then when I was about 12 or 13, my mom fell off the wagon and I kind of started walking away from God and smoking weed. You know, my mom started falling off the wagon. My dad was getting out of prison around that time when I was 12 or 13. And my mom was really struggling, and I started getting in trouble, and I got in a stolen car. I got charged with accessory to a stolen vehicle or something like that when I was a minor. I went into a house with the same friend, got caught, got charged with that, robbing a house. I'm talking, I'm 13 years old, doing these things, was a straight A student. Just everything was catching up to me, I think. Trying to be good, trying to not let all these outside things get to me. No one was really there for me. No one really focused on Matt. So, you know, I started doing that typical adolescent rebellion stuff. And that being said, when I turned 16, my mom and my stepdad were having a hard time with me because my mom had to balance her. She was getting back into drugs and alcohol. And my stepdad had to battle with that. And no one could really pay attention to me. And my dad got out of prison. And I thought it'd be a good time to move to Colorado. And so my dad did 10 years from when I was like 2 or 3 till when I was 13. He was in prison, federal prison for the methamphetamine. So I moved to Colorado because he got out of prison. They put him through a 2-year environmental program in Colorado at a college, and he started this environmental business. And I grew up really poor with my mom. We grew up in a mobile home. You know, I grew up with that church stuff for a while, and I wasn't feeling that, and I wanted to go try this new life, a new beginning in Colorado at age 16. And so I didn't know my dad well. My mom had kind of told me these terrible things about him, but I wanted a chance to get to know my dad. And so my sister actually moved out here about a year before I did. And so at about the ages of 16, and my sister was like 17, 18, we started to get to know my dad, and we're living with him. My dad got out of prison, and although he was finding financial success, he was a terrible alcoholic, and actually in prison diagnosed as a sociopath narcissist. So very worldly man, comes out, he finds some success, and you know, I looked up to him for a lot of years. I finished high school, wasn't a great student, but luckily I stopped getting in like kind of more serious trouble. Finished high school, I completely like walked away from God, was into girls and partying after high school. I started working for my dad, doing the environmental thing, even though he was like a toxic man. He had kind of broken me down in my teenage years. He wasn't happy with this product he had received from my mother, and his kids weren't exactly maybe what he had had in his mind and vision. And my dad just started getting really verbally abusive towards me and my sister, treating us bad, and kind of broke us down in a way where we felt we needed him. And so I worked for him in my 20s. Off and on, I'd get fired. I tried a couple other jobs. In the time, I'm just in survival. My dad's really successful. I'm feeling inadequate as a young man, trying to find my way in life, drinking a lot, going out to bars, and kind of getting lost in the world. I was able to kind of fit in with society, but deep down, I was really struggling. Got engaged at 25 while still working for my dad, but around that time, I started really struggling with alcohol myself. So actually around the age of 21, I'd say watching my dad always binge drink and normalize it, act silly and act crazy, but be successful and respected kind of brought a normalization to me of it. And so at 21, I started thinking it was cool to talk crudely to women and binge drink. And a few years later, I had a couple DUIs and had to acknowledge that I had acquired this drinking problem. You know, I started doing cocaine when I get drunk, just sleeping with a lot of women, didn't have any really direction. I worked for my dad, but that's just what it was. Worked for my dad, partied. So this all kind of went on till I was 30 years old working for my dad, kind of fighting with him, a very dark, toxic relationship, had no identity, really didn't have an understanding of my upbringing, not an understanding of my dad or my mom at that time. You kind of always blame yourself. You don't really see things for what they are or people for who they are. Anyway, long story short, my mom passed away at 29 from pulmonary fibrosis. It's kind of a mysterious lung disease, but it came on her pretty quick. Has to do with the lungs. She did a lot of drugs. She was a smoker. Well, when she passed, I started waking up a little bit to my dad. It was getting really hard working for him. I felt at a dead end of a road. He just was never happy with me. And he told me I wasn't capable and I was incompetent and all these things. And so at 32, I decided to branch away from my dad and start my own business. And I did that. And then I met the mother of my child. I was still an alcoholic. I had managed to find some financial success, separating away from my dad, which in return came with a lot of realizations that I was kind of fed a lot of false truths about myself that I believed. Me and Jenny, the mother of my child, had Vincent about 2 years into being together. We weren't married or anything, and very broken relationship from the beginning, but having my son with her opened up my eyes to what being a parent is and how it should be. And that was probably a really big moment for me, seeing like, this is hard for me to accept that my dad's treated me this way, has broke me down. And I couldn't really see that till I had a child. Shortly after having the child, me and her he's about a year or 2 years old. My drinking had paid its price on us. She was not liking me drinking 10 beers a night, multiple days a week, sometimes 4 days, 5 days a week, and then dealing with the effects of that. So we got into therapy and I decided to quit drinking. And so having this son, quitting drinking, me and her not working out, and then COVID. Sorry, I know you asked about childhood and I'm kind of running with the whole story, if that's all right.
Yeah, it's okay. That's okay.
Well, then with COVID, so all this is happening, like I'm quitting drinking. I have found some financial freedom, but it wasn't making me happy. Like something bigger was missing. And like all these years of trying to figure it out, like, all right, well, if I make money, if I do this, if I get the girl, I have the kid. And it's just like all hit me at once that there's something deeper here that needs to get fixed. And I don't know how to go about it. Like COVID happened and I realized like my business could get shut down at any time with this government. Things are not within my control. There seems to be an ever shifting truth out there. And I don't get it. In my heart, something feels off with what's going on. I started pushing the vaccine. Me and my mother and my child weren't really seeing eye to eye on the political stuff. And I had quit drinking. I was growing a backbone. And she ended up leaving me. When I told her I couldn't handle it anymore, she needed to change. Like there was a little bit of an abusiveness. When you're raised by a narcissist, you kind of surround yourself with these personalities. That's what you normalize. And unfortunately, in the hindsight, I have to accept that like I got with someone that was somewhat abusive. And it was hard for me to accept that like quitting drinking ended my relationship with a woman that hated me for drinking. So I was frustrated that like the healthy really wasn't an option for us. I didn't know why my son was losing his family. I had to sell my rental property to square up with her. Everything I'd ever worked for was getting threatened. I mean, my life, even though I just quit drinking, a blindfold was pulled from me. And so one day, while all this is happening, she had just moved out. And I have this business that she was helping me with my books and stuff. And I'm left alone with these things. I'm a single parent now. I'm going to have to go through this custody case. I don't know where life's going. I quit drinking. I'm not going back. And I just literally pulled over one day and said, all the oxen free. Like, I give up. I don't have this figured out. I don't know where to go or what to do. I thought putting down the bottle would fix all my problems, and it's just opened my eyes to everything. God, if you're real, if you exist, I'm crying to you. And I was crying, and I just said, like, please, like, show me, like, work with me. And then ever since then, that was about 2 years ago. And I opened up the Bible, and it really started with a journey of truth seeking. Around this time, I had this prayer. I started, I had this connection when I was 7 years old, but I had let it go because the iniquities of this world turned my heart cold, and I couldn't make sense of a God with everything I had been through with my mother and my father and these, what felt undeserving, and I turned my back on him. And then when all this, I started seeking truth, and it started with, like, where's truth come from? Morality, where did the nature of reality stem from? And I was led with my heart, but also looking for truth. And slowly through his journey, it was like, I opened the Bible, and God just started speaking to me. I don't know the timing on that prayer and whether or not I was still having my mind in other places, but it was around that same time. And basically, like, God pulled me back in, because I've told people, if you have a heart for truth, and you don't have a bias, I believe you find Jesus, And so, like, moral of the story, I guess, would be that, God's given me this time alone to work on myself, become the product he needs me to be for him. And, I don't know what my future holds. If there is a woman in the future, it'll be a woman of God. He's really just allowed me to take the time away from the world to figure out what I needed to do for me and my son, and on this path. And as the world gets darker, I believe this timing is impeccable. Like, just the way where I've come from and where he's pulling me so fast and making me be he's helping me build confidence, living in his truth, and realizing, that you can live for him. And I don't know, it's just been a wild ride. And so I'm able to look back at the whole journey and not be upset anymore, and be grateful for where I'm at now, because all the people that had the easy path, they're really struggling letting go of the flesh, and God's prepared me for this time, I feel. So I'm grateful in hindsight. I feel blessed. So that's pretty much,
that's amazing.
Vague version.
It's an incredible story that you just told, and I have so many questions. It's interesting the direction that your life took, because in the environment that you grew up in, it could have went a totally different way, and for most people, it probably would have. So I want to revisit parts of what you said earlier. You talked about the drug abuses in the home, the dealing of meth with your mom and your dad, and if I remember correctly, you said that was mostly from 5 to 8 years old. How much did you realize back then what was going on, or did you think that was normal?
Actually, the drugs were, like, more probably from age 2 till age 6. And then when we moved up to Washington, because we moved in with missionaries, I never saw any of the drugs. So the meth manufacturing when I was younger, I have no memories of my dad as a baby. Like, it was all after prison or visiting him in prison. So, like, I don't recall, like, that age around 5, 6, my mom was on crack. And so I guess my experiences then, they were terrifying. She'd have these guys come over. I remember one time in Virginia, like, I had a red balloon. I was 4 or 5 years old. And this guy just came up with his lighter and popped it. And it terrified me. I remember going with my mom on, like, crack runs in Palo Alto, and 30 crack dealers surrounding the car with us and the kids. I remember just breaking down in the cars, windows getting bashed out, car stereos getting stolen, driving to school with no windows in the car. So
And you were 6.
When that happened, I was 5 or 6. Yeah. And
that's crazy.
So I never normalized it. My mom had to hide it from me. I had enough people around me, like, and other family members or something, that it could never be too normalized. Like, So my mom was always kind of living like a secretive life, you know, with kids, because of the show she had to put on. That being said, though, we were still exposed to, like, I wouldn't say we lived in a crack house. I'm sure when I was 2.5, I lived in a straight meth house. But when my memory bank started kicking in and working at like age 5, I just remember my mom had a couple apartments and it was just the three of us, me, my mom, and my sister. And sometimes sketchy people would come by, but she kept a decent home. And she was gone a lot. She just would leave and not come home for up to 24 hours and stuff like that. So that was more or less the exposure to the drug world. And then when she got back, I'm not sure the kind of drugs, maybe meth or heroin when her mom died and she started drinking again.
Well, so you said there was a big, it was kind of a calming down of things. And then once you got to 12 and 13, it kind of flipped and you kind of became a version of what your parents were in some sense. Why did that happen?
I guess what you know is what you see. And being that I didn't have parents that were forewarning us about addiction and alcoholism because they were covering up their own, I guess partying, all that was kind of glamorized because your parents do it. And it took a lot of years. It took till recent years to go back and go, wow,
Right, because you were from like 12, 13 to 30 something, you said that you were struggling with addiction to in some way or another, right?
Yeah.
And you weren't able to break free from it until you had a kid, and then you were able to get off the alcohol.
Yeah.
But there was still something missing, right?
Right.
Talk me through.
Well, I think in our minds, we feel we normalize doing these things, and then I battled with it for over 10 years, almost 20 years with the alcohol. And, I think you think all your problems will be fixed. And so when I pulled out the alcohol, I realized I was self-medicating, like a lifetime of pain. It's spiritual, man. It's like you have these feelings that you've self-medicated. And, some people go to meetings, you're basically what you could call a dry drunk unless you're getting to the core of this. And the core is, I needed Jesus, dude. You know what I mean? Like I think that was a hole in me. And honestly, I look back to when I was a kid and the hole it filled then. And then I walked away. And the truth is like, I believe God looks at just a much bigger picture,
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, like I think I was left with like, okay, nothing's going right. And what's funny is ever since I've done this, I've had direction. You're accountable. There's purpose in it. And so it's crazy because I would say that I didn't go after it. I wasn't searching for Jesus. I was searching for truth and meaning. And that ended up being Jesus. Yeah, there was just a hole there. And it was a natural, organic pulling towards him. And then another thing I want to say is the discernment, the wisdom. It's not just doing the right thing. And it's not just eternity and all these other things. It's like this design and playing in the design that God gave us, like praying and being accountable and reflecting. It's just the best thing I've ever done for myself. So here I am, 39 years old, started this at 36, 37. And the most dramatic shift in my life has been from 37 to 39 out of all those years.
You were thinking that the alcohol would solve all your problems, and instead what it did is you removed the big problem, and then you were able to see all the other ones that were under that were creating this problem with alcohol. And then you realized really you had nothing figured out, and it seemed like your life truly changed once you found Jesus. And that's just fascinating to me.
It's weird how it works out because I am stubborn and ignorant, and I walked away from God and I wasn't eager to go back. I was just like, something's off. And with what's going on in this world. And I guess I never really questioned why we were here, just like one of those atheists that were just like, well, it's definitely not God because that dude ain't good, right? And that being said, like, now here I am going like, wow, so that's my testimony as other people. It's like, I've been where they are at. I know what it's like to just make no sense of the God thing and to look at it from the other side of the table. And I get it, man, but you're only hurting yourself because we can get out of our own way and lead with the heart. He can really, that's just it. We get in our own way. So I just had to get out of the way and give him the driver wheel, and just let him listen to him, and let him direct you and not lean on your own understanding. And it's funny because people don't want to surrender. They don't want to live life in that, like, I don't have it, but the freedom in that surrender, and the doors it opens, and like the wisdom and all that comes along with it, and getting to see this reality as it is and not how society's made it. It's just a cool journey, man. So I hope everyone tries it.
I love that. And I could probably talk about it for hours. I could probably ask you questions, until the night ends. But I guess my last question would be, you've gone through so many things in your life. What is the biggest lesson that you've taken out of it? Because you had all these challenges. You had a rough and very interesting childhood, and then your teenage years, and even in the beginning of your adult years. So what's the biggest lesson that you've taken from all of it, if you had like a message to say to a younger you?
That never think it's over. Never think you've gone too far down a road that you can't turn back around on, because you're right. If you're turning back around by yourself, it is overwhelming. But like, God can move in your life so quickly. That's the devil telling you that you've wasted time or anything like that. We're sent here on this flesh test run, and just no matter what road you've gone down, just realize Jesus can still work in you, and it's never too late, and you can always work for his kingdom. The one thing I think that I got in my head was, enough years go by and I don't figure things out, I'm done, and the truth is like, better late than never. And you can use all that pain for purpose. You can use everything you've been through, and if you surrender it to God, he'll let you use all that as knowledge and wisdom moving forward. And so I guess, like, with what I've been through at this point now, I wouldn't have had it any other way, because I believe that now I'm allowing God to use it for his glory, and I'm allowing his purpose to be done. And maybe that it had to happen in order for me to be where I'm at now, right? Everyone has their own path. So we all make mistakes. Once you turn it over to God, you have to let it go, and you're a new creation. And the day you give it to Jesus, your eternities began. We never die. So, I would just tell people that it's never too late, never gone away from God too far. And, all you have to do is receive the gift and let him work in you,
I love that. I love that. There's always hope. It's a great message. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Almost False podcast. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more interviews like this. If you found this content valuable, please share it with a friend. It really helps us out a lot, and hopefully it will help them too. If you want to be on the show, you can go to almostfalse.net and submit your story there. We would love to hear from you. With that being said, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and stay blessed.